Now, the cost of the new high-speed 2 rail network will be double current estimates, according to a new report. The Institute of Economic Affairs says that the actual cost will be closer to £80 billion. It says the plans defy economic logic. Work on the first leg between London and Birmingham is due to begin in 2017. Well, the report's author, Dr. Richard Wellings, is in our central London studio. Good morning to you, Dr. Wellings. Thank you very much for your time. You're due to publish this 58-page report that you yourself have written tomorrow, and in it you're going to say that it defies economic logic. Why?
Well, it's already quite well known that the economic case for HS2 is very weak, and even the government's own figures suggest that. So a series of independent economists have pointed to flaws in the business case, for example, the assumption that business travellers don't work on the train. So this is a poor value for money project.
How do you think the money would be better spent then?
Well, obviously, one idea would be to reduce government borrowing, or alternatively to have some tax cuts. Or if you're going to spend it on transport, then there are numerous schemes that have much better returns than high speed 2.
The Department for Transport are going to claim, though, aren't they, that HS2 is absolutely essential to our economy, that it will be a huge economic boost, and that it will also be a return on investment that will boost future generations.
Well, one problem with that is the enormous tax bill for the project. So already it's reckoned it will cost $50 billion. If we're right and there are various add-on schemes that are necessary and various other risks involved, if it's 80, 90, 100 billion, then this will be disastrous for the economy, and it's unlikely that the benefits will be worth that. And the main point is, of course, that this is a poor value for money project, and the money could be much better spent elsewhere on other transport schemes or tax cuts or whatever.
Dr. Wellings, is your sense that the government is going to plough on with this regardless of your advice? We saw a similar report with similar findings published by the National Audit Office in May, and yet it seems as though the government is keen to push ahead.
Well, I think there has been some kind of shift in terms of general opinion on this. So we've seen people like Peter Mandelson come out against it and various former chancellors. But I do think it's still quite likely to go ahead because there are very powerful entrenched interests behind the scheme. So some of the city councils in the North and the Midlands. And it will be quite difficult for the government to withdraw at this late stage. And of course, there's huge political capital invested in this now.
A group of powerful special interest groups are behind it, though. That was one of the findings of your report.
Well, I wouldn't say they're completely behind it, but they have influenced the HS2 debate and pushed it forward and influenced opinion. So you find some of the city councils have been funding various lobbying operations and so on. Also, some of the rail firms have a huge interest because the contracts for HS2 are absolutely huge. So the contract to build the trains will be an estimated £7.5 billion. So there are huge amounts of money at stake, and that means a lot of these vested interests are going to lobby very powerfully for this thing to go ahead.
There are many people claiming, though, or pointing out to the fact that we don't have any high-speed rail networks in this country. Most of Europe do have very successful and efficient high-speed rail networks. Shouldn't it be something that we pursue?
Well, these high-speed networks abroad, they seem successful, but we never look at the true cost to the economy. So overall rail subsidies in a lot of countries like France and Germany are even higher than they are in this country. In Japan, their high-speed network left them with enormous debts of around $200 billion that had to be written off. So there is a downside, but we tend not to look at that when we look abroad.
OK, Dr. Wellings, listen, thank you very much for your time. Well, let's go live to David Crabtree, who's in the village of Burton Green, one of the places that would be most severely affected by the proposed route. And I take it, David, that the report that's due to be published tomorrow will be widely welcomed there.
Yes, it will be, because this village of Burton Green here will be actually dissected by the HS2 plan. So, of course, they're dead against it. A number of their homes would have to be demolished to make way for it. The government say it will bring eventually thousands of jobs, billions of pounds of investment, the biggest UK infrastructure project in modern history. Because the Institute of Economic Affairs completely disagrees with all that.
There obviously will be benefits for certain travellers and for certain locations, but the problem is that this is a very poor value for many projects, and even the government's own figures suggest that. So this money could be better spent on other high return projects, and the long-term benefits will be an order of magnitude higher.
Well, I'm with a couple of people from the village now. If I can just ask you, You're not surprised what the Institute are saying at the moment?
No, those of us that have been familiar with the scheme for a long time now have realised that it is an economic disaster. One report's confirmed that it's going to cost about £3,000 per family with today's figures, and the new maps from the CPRE that were published today show that it's going to affect people many miles from the actual line itself in terms of the construction vehicles and the noise from that.
It's not a NIMBY case, you were saying earlier, you just want this whole thing scrapped.
Indeed. In some ways, if it was going to do half of what it's claimed to be going to be doing, one could sit back and sacrifice what it's going to do. But this is a turkey which no reputable organisation, national organisation, is now supporting. There's a whole long list of organisations and newspapers that have come out against it.
Rona Taylor here as well. Did you see this as a political move right from the beginning?
Well, yes, of course. It's very interesting that Mandelson came out very recently. He was in the cabinet at the time the Labour Party decided to go for HS2. He has come out against it. He said it was a rush decision, a decision made on the back of a fag packet for political reasons.
What are the alternatives? You've obviously become very, very much involved in this, and where should the money be better spent?
Well, I think an interesting question is, not should you have HS2, but what could the country spend 80 billion on? You ask any man in the street, he'd have his wish list, and it would not include HS2. What about investment in energy, for instance, which is a key issue? What about improving broadband across the country? What about improving other railways? I go down to Brighton frequently to see my daughter. Coventry to London is a beautiful Virgin service in an hour. To get down to near Brighton is another 2 hours. That sort of service could be improved.
OK, thank you very much indeed. So there we go, HS2 under fire like never before, but the government tell us that they still want to press ahead with this and start the work in 2017.
OK, David, thank you very much. Joe, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I take it then that this is music to your ears. You would like to see this development stopped altogether then?
Well, of course we'd like to see the development stopped altogether. The IEA is just another one of a host of independent organisations that has absolutely trashed the case for HS2. And the only people who are supporting it now are those who will benefit, who the IEA say, you've got a lot of people with vested interests who are lobbying for it, and politicians who don't want to back down because they've invested too much political capital in this. But even at the official cost of £50 billion, before you look at the increases that the IEA have forecast, it's too much for this country to afford for something that will only benefit the richest in society at a time in which the country is making massive cuts.
And the Campaign for Rural England is saying that life in towns and villages up to 25 miles away from the proposed route will be affected in a negative way.
Yeah, the CPRE's report as well. We've had two great reports today that have come out and highly trashed HS2 and the case for HS2. And CPRE's analysis is absolutely correct in that HS2 will leave a scar across rural England, and it's just too much to bear at this point. Like, the benefits simply aren't there for the losses and for the devastation that this project will cause.
The Department for Transport, of course, will argue that this is absolutely vital for the British economy, and it will not only help this generation, but for generations to come.
Well, the Department for Transport has been on a massive spin exercise since day one on this project. They've been saying that the West Coast Main Line is going to run out of capacity, which relies on a discredited analysis forecasting tool, which they don't use for anything else except justifying HS2. They've said that it's going to benefit the north and benefit the regions, but the reality is that when you look across the continent at countries that have got high-speed rail, what you find is it sucks more economic activity down to the capital. And, you know, the Public Accounts Committee were very clear on this as well. You know, another independent body, a group of MPs that time, who were set up purely to analyse whether public money is being wasted. And they were very clear that HS2 is going to suck more activity to London. And the National Audit Office said the same. There's a host of organisations that I could quote that have trashed the case for HS2. And it's really just surviving on, you know, political best wishes and this whole hope that people won't see through the spin. And the reality is that the more and more people find out about HS2, the more and more HS2 is in the news, the more people realise that it is a bad idea, that it is a white elephant vanity project that is going to suck the lifeblood out of this country.
OK, Joe Rukin, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.